So I thought I would take a little bit of a diversion from my Kyle Rittenhouse crap to talk about a problem that has inflicted our country probably since its beginning, and that is math anxiety. We've been hearing about this forever. There are some students who just simply really struggle with math, and it's not even such a matter of not being able to do it well, but rather a total phobia of it. They hear a math problem or hear about math and they start to just clinch up. And of course, the education field has decided to tackle this and, in their usual incompetent manner, has failed to solve this problem. So education reminds me of a dog that gets a hold of your best pillow. And it takes that pillow and just thrashes it back and forth, and you got the feathers flying. That's what education does to ideas. It takes ideas from other fields, for example, thrashes on them, and in the end, what you have is trash. On a rare occasion, it comes up with ideas of its own. That doesn't happen too often. That's why I say it's rare. And sometimes those ideas are good, but by the time that education gets done with them, thrashing, it's no longer effective. I'm going to now give you a solution to the math anxiety problem in this country. And it involves a teaching technique that we've had around for a long time, but nobody has ever bothered to use it to any extent. Hello out there. I am trying to get through.
With his powerful brainwaves cradled in the warmth of reasoning, it's time for Johnny Walker Dread to straighten you out on a thing or two. Emanating all the way from exciting Las Vegas, Oklahoma, it's the Johnny Walker Dread Show.
So we know the problem. There are just some people who really get frightened of mathematics. I'm not one of them. I'm a pretty good mathematician. And so it was hard for me to understand where the issue was. Unfortunately, the education field has got a hold of this and has come up with things that students can do to overcome their math anxiety. But as is typical with the education field, the solutions are always dumped on the student. This is what students can do to overcome their problems in math, to overcome their fright. It's not about what the students do. It's about what teachers should do. In truth, we're not teaching mathematics the right way. And I'm not talking about bringing in some crazy Chinese or Far Eastern math method or something from Libya or something they found in Germany or something like that. I'm talking about a very fundamental approach to teaching that we can use for all subjects that has largely been ignored. The most powerful teaching method I know for teaching abstract concepts. And it's really quite simple. It's called a think aloud. There's another term for it called metacognitive modeling. But I like to think aloud because it's really clear as to what that means. Now, you could do the think aloud, although it's rarely used. It's a very powerful technique. But that alone won't solve the math anxiety problem. But if you do the think aloud with a little twist, all of a sudden, you'll see students starting to raise their hands, starting to ask questions, and starting to feel better about their own inadequacies. Keep in mind, we all struggle to learn new material. If we don't, then the new material is not very cognitively challenging. And mathematics, for a lot of people, is really difficult, but so is English. So is history. Math isn't special in that. So let me talk about the think aloud. You may be wondering, well, what the hell is that? It goes like this. Let's suppose that you have a problem, a new learning objective that you want to teach your students. Let's say it's adding fractions. Summing fractions. Summing meaning that you can add or subtract. Summing fractions is a major problem in schools. I would suggest it may be the hardest subject to learn throughout the entire K-12 curriculum. Summing fractions is difficult, and it's taught at a very early age. And so that makes it even more difficult. And summing fractions is probably where a lot of the math anxiety sort of creeps up from in the first place. So the idea behind the Think Aloud is to, instead of teaching students how they are to sum fractions, you think out loud how you do it. The Think Aloud has to be cast in the first person, I, first person, singular. All the pronoun is I and me. It is also a pins down activity. So you want your students to put their pins down and just listen. And keep in mind, they have to be told that they're going to be asked questions when you get done explaining how you did it. So they have to pay attention. And so what you do is you walk through a problem where you describe how you think. The first thing I think about when I look at this fraction thing is, man, I always struggle at this. See how I use the pronoun I? When I first meet this problem, don't tell students how to do it. Let them listen to you think how you do it. The idea behind the Think Aloud is for students to learn to think by example. That's why it's also called metacognitive modeling. I like Think Aloud. And the idea behind it is if they hear this enough, they will start to think through problems in a manner similar to your own. Now I look at this problem and I think, oh man, I remember coming across these things before, and I always used to forget that for me to add these two fractions, both the numbers in the bottom have to be the same. In other words, their denominators have to be the same. Now keep in mind that they can change the way they think about the problem to suit their own sort of way they go about solving problems mentally. But there's another thing there that you might have missed. Let me go back over it again. When I first see this problem, I think, oh man, I've always struggled with this. I got to think hard about this. How am I going to do this problem? And so what you're doing is not only are you thinking out loud the mental process, but you're also thinking out loud the struggle. Students hear you thinking out loud how you struggle means that they start to become more comfortable with their own lack of knowledge of the subject. They're more likely to ask questions because now they feel better about the fact that they struggle with the math too. So the Think Aloud is always going to be sprinkled with lots of barriers and lots of challenges. Like I always forget, and I always make this mistake. And when I get done, I want to check because the last time I did this, I got 10 times the answer because I made this mistake. So the Think Aloud is where the teacher discloses their own personal struggles, making students feel better about the mathematics. Now, there's a practice that teachers do that's really bad. I've seen many math teachers do this. They do things in their head. They'll have some solution like such and such, and they'll look at that and they'll say, that's 12. What they're doing is showing off. They're trying to impress their students by how they can do the math in their head. That is the absolute worst thing you can do as a math teacher. It just trains the students to think there are math people and there are non-math people. The way that teacher does that in his head makes me think that I'm not a math person. He is. He's a math person. I'm not, because I can't do it in my head. You don't want to make students feel that math is some sort of gift. Instead, what you do is you say, when I come across something like this, I'm thinking to myself, the 4 times the 2 is 8. Well, okay, that 8 is going to cancel with the 2 on the bottom. Oh, this isn't really hard at all. That's how it's done. This is one of those fraction problems, and they gave me a rough time when I was a student. So let me think here. How do I do this? Let's see. I remember the denominators have to be the same. That's the number on the bottom. They have to be the same number, but they're not. This would be so easy if only the numbers in the bottom of the fractions, the denominators, are the same. Well, how do I do that? I mean, how do I get them the same? Well, let me think here. If I multiply the second fraction by 2 over 2, can I do that? Let me think. Well, 2 divided by 2 is 1, and I can always multiply by a 1. So yeah, I can do that. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to multiply this fraction by 2 over 2, and let me see here. Oh yeah, when I do that, I get 2 over 4, and now my denominators are the same. Oh, yeah, now this becomes much easier. Let me think here. Now, if I do that, now I just remember that the denominators are going to stay the same value, and so that's going to be a 4. Now I just have to add the numerators. Okay, well, that's just 3 plus 2. Oh, it's 5 over 4. And that's an example of how the think aloud is done. Now, that doesn't look all that amazing. In fact, it's quite easy. How much money do you have to spend on a district to get teachers doing this? It doesn't cost anything. If every teacher did this, in those cases where the think aloud is a good strategic choice for an instructional method, learning would improve. When is the think aloud a good device? It's a good device in a case where you have some abstraction, something that is difficult for students to sort of figure out, or when you have content that students have struggled on and you've already tried to teach them direct instruction. You've tried everything. You've tried manipulatives, you've tried all kinds of scaffolding, you've tried guided inquiry. Nothing seems to work. The think aloud is another thing that you can do. You can pull out of your tool chest and take a whack with it and see if it can help. It's particularly useful on very abstract concepts. For example, how to gauge the quality of a poem. Well, that's kind of a hard thing to describe step by step, but if you think out loud to your students about how you would go about evaluating a poem, after a while they would learn how to think like that, and they would improve their own abilities. So, the think aloud, powerful teaching strategy. If done all the time by math teachers throughout the United States, I am absolutely convinced that a lot of the math anxiety in this country would start to dissipate. Now, you talk to teachers and they'll tell you about the think aloud. Well, some of them will. I would suggest a majority of the teachers are not familiar with it. They have never actually been trained in the think aloud. But they probably know what it is. The vast, vast majority of teachers never use it. Instead, they go back to teaching their students how to do it. The first step you want to do is take the square root of both sides. So students write down their notes, take the square root of both sides. And so the teacher walks through the algorithm as if it's really easy. You see how easy that is? It's not hard at all. Instead, think out loud the process, show students how you struggle with the math at times, how you overcame it, and then when you get done, you can ask students in the checking for understanding section, how did I come about doing this problem? What was I thinking about first? Where did I have troubles? Yeah. So you see, talking about how you struggled will make students feel better about their own struggles, and the math anxiety will start to go away. If you'd like to hear more of these type of talks about education, let me know. Like my video and subscribe to my channel.